Coming up on Market to Market, the art of the deal maker tests major North American trading partners. Plus, a unique relationship shores up the Louisiana Gulf Coast. Those stories and market analysis with Tomm Pfitzenmaier next.
Big acreage increases.
Funding for Market to Market is provided by Grinnell Mutual. You think differently about a customer when you stand in the middle of his dreams. We work to make sure you get covered right. Grinnell Mutual, a policy of working together. Information on finding an agent near you is available at grinnellmutual.com. And by Sukup Manufacturing Company, offering a full line of grain drying and storage equipment and steel buildings. Sukup Manufacturing is on a mission to protect and preserve your crop and the tools that produce it. This is the Friday, April 28 edition of Market to Market, the weekly journal of rural America.
Hello, I'm Mike Pearson. As the Trump presidency marched towards the end of its first 100 days, the threat of a government shutdown seemed like the least of the crises in Washington, as North Korea, healthcare, and NAFTA dominated the cycles. Consumer confidence slipped last month, but remains at elevated levels. More orders for aircraft overcame a drop in demand for motor vehicles to push the durable goods index up 0.7%. Gas prices continued on their bullish trend as the national average price rose 13 cents to $2.42. President Trump has a full cabinet as Alex Acosta was approved as Labor Secretary on Friday. George Irvin Sonny Perdue III was confirmed and took the oath of office this week at USDA. Before the ink was dry on his paperwork, the president gave the secretary marching orders to identify and eliminate regulations that hurt rural America. A short 24 hours later, the president floated a trial balloon over a decades-old trade deal. And as Peter Tubbs reports, NAFTA wasn't the only trade issue of the week.
The United States opened another front in a commodity trade war that has been simmering for months. Early in the week, the U.S. slapped a 20% tariff on the $5 billion of lumber that Canada exports to the United States annually, partly in response to changes in the way Canada prices dairy products.
The fact is, without the support of the Canadian lumber industry, it is U.S. consumers that will be hurt. Constraining Canadian lumber imports and applying punitive duties creates price volatility in the market. And we are already seeing that reflected in higher lumber prices that are driving up the cost for American consumers, especially for families who want to buy, build, or renovate a home.
Ultra-filtered milk was the flashpoint in the current conflict. The relatively new product was not covered under Canadian dairy pricing and had found a significant export channel north of the border. Officials in Ottawa changed dairy pricing definitions to cover the product, making the U.S. version more expensive than Canadian equivalents. The loss of market share caused chaos among dairies and milk producers in New York, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. The United States and Canada have been arguing over lumber since the 19th century, and the current struggle is a result of the failure to renew a trade deal in 2015.
This present round is the fifth time Canada has had to defend its softwood lumber industry against U.S. claims over the last 30 years. Independent trade panels have repeatedly found these claims to be baseless. We have prevailed in the past, and we will do so again.
The two conflicts are battles in a threatened war over NAFTA. Leaving NAFTA was a staple of candidate Trump on the stump, who now, as president, has asked to open negotiations on changing the terms of the deal. The threat of an executive order resulted in midnight phone calls between the parties involved.
I was going to terminate NAFTA as of 2 or 3 days from now. The president of Mexico, who I have a very, very good relationship, called me. And also the Prime Minister of Canada, who I have a very good relationship, and I like both of these gentlemen very much. They called me. And they said, rather than terminating NAFTA, could you please renegotiate?
As the largest trading partner of both Canada and Mexico, the United States is looking for more favorable terms on a host of products that cross the border. Ironically, dairy is not covered directly by NAFTA, so the origin of the current dispute will have to be settled over a separate negotiating table. For Market to Market, I'm Peter Tubbs.
The Mississippi River watershed is the fourth largest in the world, covering 1.2 million square miles, or about 40% of the lower 48. The amount of food production and processing inside that massive swath produces 92% of the nation's agricultural exports. But at what cost to the river and the coastline? As John Torpy reports in our cover story, two sides normally on conflicting teams have become unified in protecting the region's precious resources.
A majority of commodities produced in the U.S. will, at some point, end up at the mouth of the Mississippi River in Louisiana, on their way to other ports of call. And while Louisianans are proud to be one of the most important shipping centers for the country, the commodity those living and working along the river would really like to see stick around is land, and lots of it. Around the turn of the 20th century, levees were constructed along the banks of the Mississippi River to control flooding and improve navigation. But without a constant supply of fresh water and sediment from the river, salt water from the Gulf has decimated the marshes and wetlands, turning many areas of the coastland into open water.
Our wetlands have been sacrificed for navigation, Mississippi River, and also for oil exploration, provide energy for the nation and industry for the nation. Well, the nation needs to help us to save our coast, because if not, where you're sitting now will become the new barrier island.
Because of this coastal loss, multiple industries in Louisiana have become more vulnerable to damage from hurricanes and storm surge that could impact the nation's economy as a whole. Along a 54-mile stretch of the Mississippi River, set between the cities of Baton Rouge and New Orleans, is the Port of South Louisiana. Over 290 million tons of commodities flow through this area annually, making this landing the largest tonnage port in the Western Hemisphere. But the port's strength in global shipping is slipping. Rising sediment levels at the mouth of the Mississippi River can restrict the amount of cargo a ship can carry to and from South Louisiana. Industry leaders from the port have petitioned the White House for funds to dredge the mouth of the Mississippi River to a depth of 50 feet. Material recovered would be diverted to areas along the coast to help restore wetlands and marshes in a practice labeled beneficial use. Earlier this year, President Trump announced a $1 trillion infrastructure proposal that included money for waterway infrastructure improvements in Louisiana. Port officials hope the president will push for permanent annual funding for dredging the channel of the Mississippi River.
These countries that are buying our grain will find another place to buy it that's more reliable and more competitive. So it's very important for the entire country to understand that dredging the mouth of the river is a national problem, a USA problem, not a Louisiana problem.
Beneficial use of dredging material to replenish the wetlands and marshes of coastal Louisiana is part of a multi-pronged approach to help restore parts of the Pelican State's coast. Responding to hurricane recovery efforts in 2005, the Louisiana legislature organized the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, or CPRA. The agency was charged with developing a set of plans that would address hurricane protection and coastal restoration. Every 5 years, the group delivers their master plan to the Louisiana legislature. For the 2017 Coastal Master Plan, 120 projects were proposed to create and maintain land along the coast. One of those projects is located at the Caminada Beach and Headlands. Over the past 5 years, work has been done to rebuild a beach crucial to birds and create a barrier protecting an important oil and gas industry port from extreme weather events.
This beach right here, this beach in Headland, is the first line of defense from storms. And if you can provide that protection here, then that helps to protect the interior parts of the basin where the majority of our population lives.
Oil and gas industry leaders government officials and wildlife experts brought together by CPRA worked to design and rebuild the beachhead using funds from the 2010 BP oil spill settlement. But the plan was missing one ingredient: sand. Planners made the decision to pull the key element from two sources.
So here in Louisiana, we have a resources problem. We have a problem with we don't have enough natural resources sometimes to help restore the areas that we need. So we really need to get that resource from outside of the system, whether it's sediment from the Mississippi River that makes it the muddy Mississippi River, or if we have to go offshore to mine sand to put on this beach. We need new material.
The beachhead built with newly mined sand protects Port Fourchon, which services 90% of the oil and gas operations in the Gulf of Mexico. Roughly 1.5 million barrels of crude oil flow through the pipelines at the facility each day, making Port Fourchon responsible for roughly 18% of the nation's energy supply. While business in the port may be booming, land mass continues to shrink, forcing commissioners in Lafourche Parish to think environmentally in order to survive economically.
We're actually going to rebuild an area in and around the port. So when we dredge to create a slip, we're building land both for industrial development, but we're also, as well as building land for a marsh creation.
Even as businesses along the Mississippi River are finding ways to help alleviate coastal erosion, more land continues to slip away. State officials estimate that without further work, Louisiana could lose 2,250 square miles of coastland over the next 50 years. The problem was not lost on Governor John Bel Edwards. Last week, he declared a state of emergency along Louisiana's coast.
We're not ever going to take down the levees of the Mississippi River. That's not going to happen. We know that. We're not going to do anything that's going to impair navigation and ships, along our ports and our river, because that is vital to the economy of the entire United States.
State officials hope the move will speed up the federal permitting process, helping greenlight coastal restoration projects in the 2017 master plan.
The sense of urgency here is definitely heightened, and that we have this small window of opportunity to do as much as we can. And maybe we are just holding the line, but that's important to us here.
For Market to Market, I'm John Torpy.
Next, the Market to Market report.
Less than ideal weather conditions in wheat and corn country have helped provide support for the trade. For the week, July wheat rallied 11 cents and the nearby corn contract added 3 cents. The soy complex suffered from several ailments: exports, weather, and fundamentals to keep a lid on the July soybean contract, which shed a nickel. May meal increased $2.20 per ton. In the softs, July cotton fell 46 cents per hundredweight. Over in the dairy parlor, May Class 3 milk futures declined 27 cents. Massive gains in the livestock sector. The June cattle contract improved $7.33. August feeders added 17% during April and put on $12.45 just this week. The June lean hog contract gained 8% or $5.67. In the currency markets, the U.S. dollar index shrank 98 basis points. Crude oil fell 35 cents per barrel. COMEX gold lost $20.80 per ounce, and the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index dropped 1 basis point to finish the week at 381.70. Here now to let us his insight on these and other trends is one of our regular market analysts, Tomm Pfitzenmaier. Tom, welcome back.
Thanks, Mike.
Before we get started, you can listen to our market discussion anytime by downloading our market analysis and Market Plus podcasts on our website, iptv.org/MTOM. Tom, let's talk about this wheat market. We have a massive cold front pressing down on the plains. We've got snow, potentially a blizzard in western Kansas. We've got sub-freezing temperatures in northern Iowa. Why did wheat not respond really at all this week?
There's too much wheat in the world. I mean, the weather conditions improved in Europe, where they were a little bit dry, so they had better rainfall. South American wheat's a little bit better. There's just too much of it, and I don't think anybody cares all that much. I mean, wheat's in a trading range. July wheat closed around 430, I think. We're probably in a range from 450 to 410. We chop around in there, and with the huge supplies we've got, it's going to be tough to break it out of that. Now we got this wheat tour coming up next week, so that's going to give some actual boots on the ground, so to speak, of people, you know, looking at the crop, and it will have had a week to sort of see how that cold weather affected the crop. So that may be a factor as we go into next week. But even at that, I don't see wheat doing anything but having a trading range. That being said, you get into that high end of the range of 450 plus, then I think you start making some sales and getting some stuff moved.
Okay, but in the meantime, just let it try to find some reason to move back up into the top side of that range.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Now, we are seeing pretty significant delays in spring wheat plantings. Again, with this cold and potential snow, we probably will see those delay even further. Are these just more acres we're going to have to end up assigning towards soybeans?
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, that's the trend in those wheat areas, is that's where it's going. Wheat prices are pretty so-so compared to soybean prices. And so I would imagine that's the decision that's going to be made.
Any chance those fewer wheat acres could be enough to push us above that 450 level in the Chicago
I don't
contract?
think, well, if they were that, you know, that potential exists, but I don't think they're going to be that much fewer.
Okay.
So again, it could push us back up toward the top end of the range, but you get up to 470 and all of a sudden the U.S. isn't competitive in the world stage at all for wheat prices. So, I mean, there's upper limits there that we just lose out when we get up to those levels.
We got too much wheat.
There's too much wheat.
And at the price level today, are we seeing a lot of wheat continue to move into feed rations, or are most feeders just turning to corn right now with its value?
Well, there's cheap corn, a lot of cheap corn. I mean, and sorghum, and there's tons of DDGs because the Chinese have backed out of that market. Plus, we're producing ethanol like crazy, which is generating more DDGs. So there's competition for feed there. That's pretty good competition.
All right. Well, let's talk about corn. We've got a lot of growers sitting in the countryside today that still have a lot of old crop corn. They're waiting on that weather scare. We're watching this cold snap. We're watching these wet, cold days come in. And I'm hearing from a lot of producers, why isn't the market responding? Why aren't we worried about a planting delay quite yet?
Why would we? Why would we? The whole world knows that these guys are sitting on all this corn. Who doesn't know it? All you have to do is bump the basis a little bit. You buy enough every week. They're buying some corn from somebody. If you're an end user, are you going to pay any more than you have to pay for a corn when you know there's tons of it? When you know Argentina's getting ready to harvest a fairly decent crop, maybe they've had some weather problems and it's not as decent as we thought it was going to be, but it's close. And then you've got the Brazilian safrinha crop pollinating, and the conditions there are great. That crop's going to hit the market in that July-August time period. So what you've got are a U.S. farmer sitting on this big crop waiting for this rally that everybody guarantees they're going to get. If you read a market analyst, watch all the TV shows, all you see every single week is don't sell corn because it has to go up. So here we sit on this crop. We're going to hold it into the summer. Right at the smack dab at the time the Brazilians are going to try and sell their crop too. Now, how do you think that's going to work out basis-wise? Probably not real well.
So what do? Do you go ahead and just bite the bullet and get rid of some today? Start marketing, empty the bins today?
I don't know if you empty them, but you sure start feeding some into the market, and certainly use any rallies that come along to do that. Now, what generates those, I don't know. Maybe we will get a little weather delay rally. I mean, we've tried to talk that up this week, and for nothing. So maybe next week will be the week. But a lot of people have got corn planted. A lot of people haven't. That's the way it goes every year. Some people can, some people can't. Next thing you know, somebody else can. And before you know it, the 20th of May comes around and most of the corn's planted. Yep. So, you know, it's hard to get excited about planting delays simply for that reason.
So don't be holding out for $4 old crop or $4 1/4 new crop necessarily.
If you're North Central Iowa and you're getting that 335 to 350 range, you're probably going to have to start making some sales. And I know that's not a great price, and you know the average break even's what, 369? I think I read the other day. So I mean it's not very satisfying,
which is tough for a lot of guys to do.
And I know the decision-making process of when you're talking about profit maximization is substantially different than when you're talking about loss minimization. It's not near as much fun. So I get that, but you know, you're really betting the farm, so to speak, by waiting on this summer rally. Because, and it gets cited, well, we did it last year. We did it last year because South America had an awful crop. And because we had all this El Nino, La Nina, whatever, something or other concern that the funds got all excited about. The funds are heavily short. Now, I know we hear the funds are short. When they cover those shorts, that's going to give us the rally. And maybe it will.
Okay,
I mean, I can't
take
say
advantage of it if it does.
That's something you take advantage of. Certainly. And just doing that can give you 30 cents. I'm not minimizing that, but you also better recognize that a lot of that's going to be futures, and probably that basis is going to widen out on you when and if that happens.
Okay. Well, now let's talk about soybeans. We did see a week, 800,000 tons exported this week in the final week of April, and the market still just slept right through it.
Best export sales in 10 weeks, we got nothing.
Nothing. What happened? We don't care. Too many beans. Brazil's is huge.
Too many beans. We're even have export sales at 102% of the USDA's projected. Now, it's not uncommon to be a couple percent over because we tend to lose some at the end of the market. So that's about right. But boy, if we have any more, at some point the USDA is going to have to bump their estimate of export sales by 10 or 20 million. Oof. So I mean that still leaves you to carry out of 410 or so. I mean that's still a lot of beans. And then if we do push this corn planting back a little bit, and you have a little bit of switching to beans, you know, it's tough to get a rally in beans. Like I said, you said, you have the 800,000 metric ton sale this week, and the market yawned.
Right. So that leads us right into our Twitter question from Neil in central Wisconsin. He's in the boat that I understand a lot of producers are in. He says he has not contracted beans yet for his 2017 crop. Same question, do you wait for a weather scare, or do you get some sales on the books today for that November delivery?
I don't know. We've broken the beans pretty hard. Certainly, if you get up in that $9.90 to $10 range, basis to November contract, I think you get pretty aggressive at making sales. If you want to be scale up to that level, that's probably all right. But you know, there's a lot of beans in the world. Even China's switching acres from corn to beans. So everybody's jumping on that bandwagon a little bit. So those rallies are probably going to be disappointing. Again, I wouldn't start right here, but if we do have a short covering rally by the funds that can give us a nice bounce, that's what I'd use.
Get another quarter on there before you start making some up 985 in there.
Right.
All right. Well, now we've been talking about loss minimization in the grains. Let's switch the topic to profit maximization here as we take a look at the livestock markets, Tomm Pfitzenmaier. We had 2 years of bloodletting in the cattle feeding industry. These past 2 weeks, we have seen live cattle be on fire. How much longer can it continue?
It could continue for a little while here. I mean, we had Friday. At noon, we had the April contract go off the board at 136, 137, wherever it ended up. Huge price rally this week, as you pointed out earlier, and yet you've got the June contract down there at 121, 22. You've got the cash market in that 138 to 140 range. So here you go with a great big disparity. The packers are making decent money. Cattle are not light, but they're not heavy weights on them. The numbers are getting harder and harder to find. They've gotten pulled ahead. So I think you can have some decent prices for a while here. Now, I'm not going to say that June cattle can't set back to 115 or 14 and a half, something like that. But I wouldn't get in a big hurry to hedge anything.
Okay.
Maybe buy some puts if it makes you nervous. Having said all that and addressing your profitability, there's guys that have put calves on that are looking at prices here where they can lock in a couple $100 a head on them, and if you can do that, maybe there's more, but you got to sit and ask yourself, am I going to be unhappier if I got a $200 profit and it goes to 300 and I miss that, or if it goes from 200 down to closer to zero, which is going to make me less happy?
And not necessarily you, but your lender.
Yeah.
Are you going to be allowed to feed cattle into the future? Yeah, we've got
your operation in general. I think that's a calculation you have to make, and I understand it could go higher, but You know, maybe there's some packer contracts or something you do
Okay.
to get that if you're scared to death of margin calls, which, you know, obviously this past week has proven could be pretty devastating. So
same question to you on feeder cattle. Another massive run. Is there still room to the upside in feeders?
well, if you've got cheap corn, you've got the fat market as strong as it is, I can't imagine they aren't going to bid up for feeders.
Okay.
I mean, we're at 145, 146. I think you could put another $20 on that market.
All right. Well, now let's talk about lean hogs before we let you go. Again, same story, big rally. Did we finally see the cash market come around in the lean hogs?
Yeah, but we're going to, I mean, I think we're going to be looking at some numbers. I just think June hogs, we put $4 or $5 on them this week.
$5.50.
You put another couple of bucks on there, I think you got to start looking at them again. I think the upside on those June hogs from these levels is probably somewhat limited.
Okay, that 80 is going to be a pretty tough nut to crack. Is that what you're thinking?
You certainly would want to make sales if you got back up there, and I'd be surprised if we did.
Okay. Well, Tomm Pfitzenmaier, really appreciate all your insight here this week.
Thanks, Mike.
That wraps up the broadcast portion of Market to Market. However, Tom and I will keep the market conversation going, including answering more of your questions during Market Plus, which is available in podcast and video form on our website. While you're there, check out the link to our Flipboard magazine, Market to Market reading material. Each day, our producers update the collection of news they are reading and put it in one convenient location. And join us again next week when we explore how heritage breed farmers are producing pork with a purpose. So until then, thanks for watching. I'm Mike Pearson. Have a great week.
Market to Market is a production of Iowa Public Television, which is solely responsible for its content. Funding for Market to Market is provided by Grinnell Mutual. You think differently about a customer when you stand in the middle of his dreams. We work to make sure you get covered right. Grinnell Mutual, a policy of working together. Information on finding an agent near you is available at grinnellmutual.com. And by Sukup Manufacturing Company. Offering a full line of grain drying and storage equipment and steel buildings, Sukup Manufacturing is on a mission to protect and preserve your crop and the tools that produce it.